Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World. Had to think for a minute there. It's Friday the 13th. So if you're superstitious, then this is not the best day for you. But I'm not particularly superstitious, so I'm not going to worry about that. And anyway, it's Thursday the 12th right now when I'm recording this. And my topic is going to be the difference between knowing something and believing something. And the difference in simple terms is pretty easy to understand. But when you start digging deeper, then it all gets a little bit murky and it shifts in different directions that are not quite as predictable as we might suppose at the beginning. So let's start down that path. Now, some philosophers will say quite simply that the difference between knowing and believing has to do with the nature of truth. And in essence, you cannot know something that's not true. That in itself is something that I might problematize a little. I remember in the original Men in Black, I don't remember the exact quotation, but it was something like K saying to J, 1,000 years ago, people knew the world was flat, and 500 years ago, the people knew that we were the only species on the earth, and so I don't remember the quotation exactly, but the point is that in that case Agent K was using the verb know in a way that philosophers would consider to be incorrect. That is, 1,000 years ago people didn't know the earth was flat because it's not flat. You can't know something that's false. You can believe it, but you can't know it. And so that's the first and fundamental difference, is that you can believe things that are true or false, but you cannot know things that are false. Now here's my question to you. If all you can know is what is true, then can you actually know anything unless you can prove that something is true? Well, that's where things get a little bit murky, because proving that something is true is not as simple as you might think. But there are nuances. Now, for one thing, there are different kinds of truth. There are truths by definition, for example. One of the classic philosophical cases is the definition of a bachelor. You say a bachelor is a young man, or a man, I guess, who's eligible to be married, who has never been married. And so you can say that is what a bachelor is by definition. And there are some minor quibbles on the edges, like, is the Pope a bachelor? And I would say no, he's not a bachelor because he's not eligible because of his beliefs and his vows and so on and so forth. But that's truth by definition. There are also truths that we can call empirical truths. Now, another way to think about an empirical truth is that it is something that is corroborated by observation. And of course, an enormous amount of science is based on empirical observation. And when we're not being too philosophically complicated, we can accept the truth of certain observations. Like, I can look out the window now and I can say the sun is shining. And that will be corroborated by anybody else who's around here. And so we also sometimes call that an intersubjective truth. That is, I observe it, it's my subjective reality, but it's also the subjective reality of the security guard and the manager and my next door neighbor, and so we say it's intersubjectively true. So in that sense, I can say I know the sun is shining. I don't have to say, I can say I believe the sun is shining, but I can say something stronger than that. I can say I know the sun is shining because it's empirically true. But observation is tricky. Like, for example, can I say I know that the earth moves around the sun? Well, empirically, that's a little bit complicated, because when I look out the window, what I observe is the sun moving. So I can't really say that I know the earth goes around the sun, or in the case of the sun moving, it's more like the earth rotating on its axis. Can I say empirically I know that the earth is an oblate sphere, or empirically that the earth goes around the sun? Well, yes, I can, but I'm not relying on my own observations so much as I'm relying on the observations of others and the theories that they are applying to those observations to explain phenomena like night and day, the seasons, and so forth. They all make sense, fit within a theoretical paradigm or model, and a conflicting paradigm that the earth is a flat disk surrounded by a dome, as presented in the first chapter of Genesis, doesn't stand up to the same scrutiny. That is, the flat earth model with a dome, the sky as a blue dome, does satisfy some observations, some empirical observations, but it doesn't satisfy a lot of others. Now, here's the question. Can I say I know that the earth goes around the sun? And the answer is no, I can't. And the reason I can't is because of Einstein's general and specific special theories of relativity. Where in order for us to make a claim that something is moving in an absolute sense, I have to have a frame of reference, an absolute frame of reference against which to judge it. And we don't have that when it comes to the universe. We do when it comes to movement on Earth. I can say relative to the room, I am stationary, or if I were to get up and move, I could say I am moving relative to the room, relative to my desk, relative to other things. But that's the nature of relativity. I am moving relative to something else. So I can say that the Earth is moving relative to the Sun, but I can't say that in absolute terms, because Einstein's equations allow me to say that the Sun is also moving relative to the Earth, because there's no universal coordinate system to judge the movement of one or the other by, that they both work. That's the huge problem with Einstein's relativity. So the best I can do is I can say that for local purposes, the Earth goes around the Sun. But can I say, I know the Earth goes around the Sun? No, I can't. Because the truth of that proposition is relative to a coordinate system that doesn't exist. Now, this is important because when we talk about religion, and some of you will remember going back to my science versus religion videos, you'll remember that I had some trouble with the notion of science as opposed to religion, usually cast in terms of science is about knowledge, truth, things that we know, and religion is about belief. And what I said then, I'm going to more or less, I guess, repeat now, is to say that that dichotomy is spurious. And I'm not saying that I want to elevate the beliefs of religion. I'm not saying that at all. If you take a religion like Christianity, Christianity is built on doctrine which are summarized in creeds. And creed is an English cognate of the Latin phrase credo, which is the start of each creed. Credo in Latin, I believe. So the Apostles' Creed, I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. It's not saying I know that God is the maker of heaven and earth. It's saying I believe it, and so on and so on and so on. All fine. That's the nature of religion. It starts and finishes with a statement of belief. What I want to add to that is that what we call science is also a belief system. And I, in previous videos, have talked about this also. There are certain beliefs that are considered to be bedrock. For example, science works on the belief that if you do the same thing under controlled circumstances again and again and again, you will have the same result. And leading to a funny definition of madness. which is doing the same thing over and over again, believing that the results will be different, attributed to all kinds of people, including Einstein, but we don't actually know who originally said it. But the point is that science is predicated on the assumption that the same cause will always produce the same effect. Well, empirically that seems to be true, but it's a belief. And it's quite possible that contemporary quantum mechanics may undermine that belief, as well as chaos theory and a number of other promising areas of science. That just because I drop my pen 1,000 times and it falls to the ground because of my faith in gravity, doesn't mean that if I continue to do it, it won't do something different one time. Now, it might be one time in a trillion or a quadrillion or whatever, but we have to recognize that the belief that the same cause produces the same effect always is a belief. It's not something we can know. So when it comes to analyzing the worldviews that are called science and the worldviews that are called religion, we need to temper our judgment and realize that all of our worldviews are systems of belief. They are not systems of knowledge. Perhaps we can call them systems of provisional knowledge. And that's what scientists often say, that we're trying to get closer and closer and closer to the truth. But we are not at the truth yet. And my argument is that we actually never will get there. And there are all kinds of other things that may happen in the meantime. And in the meantime, I'm going to sign off now, but please like and subscribe and tell your friends. Have a good weekend. Don't do anything dangerous on Friday the 13th. And I will be back on Tuesday, possibly with a recipe.